Hey, what's up everyone? We're going to be continuing our tier list adventure. This time around we're going to be venturing into Constructed. So last time I did this video, this was how the tier list used to look like, and back in the day, I believe at that time Chain did not really have his Seeds of Agony ban yet. So quite a lot of stuff has changed. Also in the meantime we've had release of Tales of Aries. You have all team Briar, especially Briar and Lexi now roaming around in the format. But before I start adding the new heroes, I want to check what do I feel about the tier list right now? Well, first of all, I think with the coming of Briar, let's just put Briar in the S tier because everyone knows by now, right? Briar has been absolutely amazing the past few weeks, and Briar has been topping quite a lot of events. If you look at the statistics, like this deck is represented at some places even 60% of the entire meta. So yeah, Briar is a very good deck. Why we'll get on to in a second, but in terms of the S tier list right here, I think Chain with the Seeds of Agony ban is now an A tier hero. But yeah, Chain is still a very good hero. I think Katsu is still very solid. However, Katsu struggles a bit against decks like Briar because they can raise him. Also, Katsu sometimes struggles against Prism if you play the mid-range variant. The aggro variant, not as much. So I think Katsu is definitely an S tier, like a tier 1.5 hero now. I'll drop him into the A tier list for the time being because he is a little bit susceptible to being just completely taken over when he faces something like an aggro Briar. All Team, I had a lot of hope for. I actually thought that All Team originally was going to be an S tier hero, if I have to be honest, simply because of that awesome defense reaction built into it. I do feel All Team has a very solid matchup against Briar from what I've seen, but unfortunately against the rest of the meta, All Team is kind of lagging behind. Because of that, I have to put them into the B tier slot for the time being. A friend of mine told me that when he was navigating All Team, he seems to also consistently lose to the Bravo decks, and this friend has even made first place in the Swiss Nationals, so he does know what he's talking about. Personally, I don't have as much experience with All Team as I would like. Normally, I want to play at least 50 to 100 games with every deck before I can have a solid opinion about it. However, from what I've seen, I think All Team is not really going to be the top hero. I think Bravo is going to be the Guardian that will remain at the top. And then we have Lexi. Lexi is doing very well. I think Lexi is an A tier hero at this point of time. It could make a push to S tier if there are more Briar decks, but even with all the frost shenanigans that this deck pulls off, it seems to still struggle against this monstrosity up here. In terms of Prism, I think Prism is a little bit less represented now. I think Prism has dropped down a bit. Same with the Dash. Dorinthia is doing very well. I saw, I think it's Oscar Cruz that got first place in the Nationals with Dorinthia, and a friend of mine, Mitchie, got second place in the Swiss Nationals with Dorinthia. So I think Dorinthia is a very solid hero, especially against the current metagame. So I think Dorinthia actually moved up a slot again, simply because this deck has the potential to raise, especially in a metagame where everyone doesn't really want to block. So I think Dorinthia is right now S tier for sure. Bolton, I'm not sure about. I would say he is still around the A tier, but I haven't really seen him much. But I think I'm just gonna leave him. I think the deck is still very solid, especially with that Luminous Ascension turn of his. And yeah, other than that, I think everything is still about the same. Levia is a little bit more playable now, which is a very nice thing to see. Because we're now in a metagame where people don't really want to block much, I think Levia has definitely moved up to the C tier now. And I think Reina is absolutely solid. I think Reina right now is an A tier hero. And I think this is overall the tier list as I think right now. Maybe Dorinthia should be here. Yeah, let's just put her here for the time being. She is good, but not... I don't know. Like, it really depends on the person piloting this deck. Like, if you are a diehard Dorinthia fan and you've been practicing this deck a lot, then you can probably navigate it at an S tier level, similar to Katsu. But in terms of actual deck performance, I think these two are definitely the best ones. So yeah, what can you expect at something like the Calling? I think in the Calling, the decks that you can mainly expect to see is Bravo, Briar, probably some Lexis here and there. Katsu is always going to be a fan favorite that you will see pretty much everywhere. And I think Dorinthia herself. So these are the 5 heroes that I will go over in terms of how to counter these, but let's talk about Briar a second before we move into that. So Briar has been taking over the metagame lately, and the reason why is because Briar is an absolutely efficient aggro deck. Briar has a very cool ability that I also covered in the video a few days ago, where if you play 2 non-attack actions, then you generate an embodiment of lightning token, and that token actually gives go again to your next attack action card that you play. That could be in this turn, could also be in the next turn, so you could even pull off some very cool shenanigans like play 2 non-attack actions and then attack with the weapon to preserve your lightning token. But because of this efficiency, this deck can go wide rather quickly, especially if they use things like Plunder Run in combination with Snatch. They can sometimes get like 6, 7 or 8 attacks. Like I was playing against a friend the other day and I believe I had 10 cards in a single turn. Like I had 1 arsenal, 4 in hand, but 2 of them were Plunder Runs. I had the Snatch and stuff like that, and I just went ultra wide in a single turn, I believe dealing 35 damage or something like that. So a ridiculous amount of damage. Because of that, Briar is now really completely taking over the meta. Decks like Prism that were kind of doing okay against the mid-rangey meta are completely gone now. From what I can see, there's still a few diehard Prism fans, but they are not really performing as well as they were in the Chain meta, because Chain was a relatively slower deck compared to Briar, and Prism does need a bit of setup time and stuff like that. You see decks like Dash that previously were able to have a very good control game against Briar that can't even keep up, and this is a almost entirely like a pure control deck, I would say. Like most of Dash players just play pure control, but they cannot keep up with this kind of shenanigans. Cuts has the same issue. He can use Flick Flags and then defend with a combo card to block like 2 attacks, but beyond that, Katsu doesn't really want to block too much. But Briar doesn't care. Briar just keeps on going. Just keeps on spitting out attacks like left and right. And yeah, what are we gonna do with that as a metagame? We did see that Bravo has a very decent matchup against Briar. That's probably why Bravo is still doing quite well in the meta right now, because Bravo has a lot of very interesting crush effects that takes away the go again from Briar, and also uses stuff like Pummel to force Briar to discard stuff. But I think this one right there, this is the deck to beat in the current metagame, and followed very closely by Bravo right after that. So what do you do when you're facing a deck like this? Well, the thing that I do is you kind of want to take advantage of the weakness of these decks, and in case of Briar, it's that even though they have these embodiment of Earth tokens, they don't really want to block. They need to have their non-attack actions to play during their turn so that they can do a go again on whatever attack they have in their hand. Because of this, they don't really want to block with their non-attack actions, even though they can defend for an absolute ton if they have a bunch of these embodiment of Earth tokens. And at the same time, because they don't want to block with the non-attack actions, their attack actions, they are very weak to block with. Like, most of the attack actions in that deck are blocking for 2 damage, some of them for 3, but in general they don't even run any defense reactions. Maybe a few Sigil of Suffering or something like that, but at most you're gonna see like 3 of them. So what I personally do, and I mostly play Katsu myself, is I take advantage of the fact that they don't want to block, and by doing so I can string together some very ridiculous turn with a deck like Katsu, and I think the same goes for decks like Dorinthia. They can string together absolutely insane turns if they go unchecked, because if the first weapon swing isn't blocked, they can swing another time if they have go again, and they can start generating tokens and stuff like that. And once you start generating tokens with a Dorinthia deck, then Briar has a very hard time catching up. Reiner is in a very similar situation where he can just intimidate stuff out of the hand and make blocking very hard or difficult for Briar, so I think Reiner is another hero that has a very decent matchup against a deck like this. Lexi with the Frost version of Lexi, I think the Frost version can really put pressure on a deck like this, because Briar does not want to pitch any resources. They want to just play everything for free, and a deck like Lexi can easily put down a Channel Lake Frigate to kind of stop them from playing stuff for free and forcing them to pitch, which usually they don't really have the resources for. or she can use stuff like Blizzard to just take the Go Again away from one of their attacks and just stop that turn that way. So I think Frost Lexi is definitely one of the decks that can really keep this deck in check. And other than that, I think in terms of Boltyn, it's really a dice roll. If Boltyn can get his big combo turn by turn 3 with the multiple Luminous Ascensions, he's likely gonna win a matchup against Briar. But in my experience, you only have that like 50 to 60% of the time. So because of that, he is gonna have a very tough time against a Briar deck in general, because Boltyn doesn't really want to block either, and Briar can just go mega wide, which is really an issue. Chain probably has a good matchup against a deck like this, because Chain can play a very defensive game and then just play whatever he banishes with the Soul Shackles. So I think Chain is one of those decks that can really mitigate the damage that Briar deals and maybe limit it to like 5 to 6 damage a turn and then do a big swing back himself, putting Briar in a tough spot. He can kind of win the race that way. And I think, like I said, well, Bravo, he just makes people discard. He has Crush Effects that takes away Go Again. He has lots of ways to deal with Briar in general. So I think these are definitely the hero lineups that can deal with a deck like this. These heroes down here, they don't really have a means of dealing with this deck, and that's kind of an issue. But that means, since these are the heroes that we're going to be seeing the most to counter this deck, if we're not facing this deck in general, we also need some ways to deal with these things. So generally speaking, I like to put a couple of defense reactions into my other decks, like Katsu, like Dorantia, like Reiner, because with some defense reactions we can kind of try and get one of those into our arsenal and then use those in order to stop a big Crush Effect turn. We can also use our equipment to stop some damage like that. Of course, Bravo does have access to Pummel, and sometimes they can jank us out by playing a Pummel on top of their Dominate, which makes it very hard to block the Crush Effect even if we have a defense reaction. But I think generally speaking, you're going to be seeing a big turn like that, like maybe once or twice in an entire game. Oh, sorry. You're going to be seeing a turn like that like once or twice in an entire game, and because of that, you don't really need to worry about it too much. As long as you can keep your life total relatively high, you can usually have like 1 or 2 bad turns in a game and then just make your comeback after that. So I would say like sight in like 3, maybe up to 6 defense reactions against a deck like this, and try getting them into your arsenal so you can block with something that blocks for 3 from hand, or maybe another defense reaction from hand and then block with another defense reaction from the arsenal. That's the best way to stop the Crush Effects in general. Personally, I like to race Bravo because I feel if you start racing a deck like this, they have very little room to actually set up their big plays, because you are forcing them to block every single turn, and if you're navigating a deck like Dorantia or Katsu, then it becomes very difficult for them to do all this kind of stuff. Also, if you navigate something like a Lexi deck, you can make their stuff cost a ton more with those Channel Lake Frigates and stuff like that. Because of that, it's going to be very hard for them to do pretty much anything, because Frost Lexi can really freeze a Bravo in their tracks. Boltyn, not so great of a matchup against Bravo, I would say. I think Boltyn gets beaten up pretty badly by a Bravo deck here because of all the discard effects and stuff like that. They cannot really set up their combo properly. Chain has a decent matchup, I would say, but yeah, the Seed of Agony ban is still a little bit painful for Chain players. They are kind of dependent on luck to get some good top decks, because they cannot really block with everything from hand anymore. They need to keep some non-attack actions in the hand in order to be able to attack in with the Unhallowed Rites and stuff like that. So, but still a very solid deck. I think it's a 50-50 matchup against Bravo, I would say. Maybe a little bit higher depending on how good of a Chain player you are facing as a Bravo player, but I think that's about it. Let's see, Reiner. Well, Reiner just does Reiner things with his Intimidate shenanigans, and that's about it. So in terms of countering something like a Katsu deck, Katsu kind of wants to go off with his combos, and the easiest way that I found to counter a Katsu deck is if you can block their first physical attack fully, so that they cannot get the Katsu trigger, you kind of throw off their entire game plan, because that means that they need to attack with another thing from the hand in order to try and get that physical hit to trigger the Katsu, and at that point they usually don't really have the resources left in hand to discard and to really do their full combo that way. So I would say in terms of countering Katsu, try to counter their first attack. In terms of Dorinthia, because of all the reprise effects, I actually sometimes don't really know what to do when I face a deck like this. Like, yeah, if you have a bad hand, you can just block with your whole hand and just stop their entire turn like that. However, like, if you block from your hand and they suddenly start going off with all the reprise effects, it just feels very bad. So sometimes even if I'm navigating an aggro deck, I even try to raise something like a Dorinthia and try to maybe block like their second attack or something like that if I feel that I can fully block that second attack and stop them from gaining the +1 counter on the Dawnblade. Once in a while they will have a Dominate turn with a, what's the thing called again? Iron Song Determination, is that the one? That gives Dominate their swing. If they have that in combination with something like a Steelblade Supremacy, they're going to be dealing an absolute ton of damage. So I would say try keeping your equipment for a big turn like that, so you can block with all your equipment and one card from hand. And if you're smart, try to get a defense reaction into your arsenal, so when they swing in, you can put your defense reaction on top of that, and that way you can kind of stop a lot more damage that way. If you feel there are going to be a lot of Dorinthia players in your local meta and you don't really know how to counter them, one of the cards that I like to put into my decks when I am in a Dorinthia meta, when I notice a lot of my friends are playing Dorinthia at our local store, is a little card called Reinforce the Line. What Reinforce the Line does is it gives an attack actions defense +4. It's an instant spell, so it doesn't really count in their Dominate turn. And what I do is I just block with something that has 3 defense from hand. I use a Reinforce the Line from hand to push it to 7, and then I can even put a defense reaction from my arsenal on top of that, pushing it to 11. If I have some equipment, I can even put it up to like 15 block or something like that. So I think Reinforced Line is definitely one of those anti-Dorinthia cards. And I kind of suspect that Dorinthia will be making a big comeback in the near future, especially because there's such a solid matchup against Briar in general. So if you haven't picked up a playset of Reinforced Line since it's a Crucible of War card, I would really suggest getting 3 of them already, because it's just a very solid card in pretty much any deck that doesn't use too many non-attack actions, because you can really take advantage of you can take advantage of people using Dominate to win by using an instant to push up the damage that way. So really keep an eye out for that. Alright, I think I need to cut the video short because they are doing some construction outside, and every time I start talking there is a bunch of noise. You might be able to hear it even now a little bit. But yeah, I will continue this tier list where I talk about how to counter Lexi, Bolton and Chain in general. I still need a bit more practice against Reiner to figure out a proper counter plan against that deck. But so far, I think this is my tier list up until now. I'm very happy with this tier list. I think it's a very solid representation of the current meta game. If you have any remarks or you have any advice of how you would counter certain heroes, feel free to leave them down in the comments. This is also especially useful for the newer players among us that want to learn more how to counter the current meta game and stuff like that. But we did cover the top heroes right now, in my opinion, like Briar, Bravo, Katsu and Dorinthia. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time with the continuation of this video. Take care.